The Rebbe starts off the Sicha by saying that we know that Torah is a Torah achas. It's a unified Torah. So the four different ways of Pshat, Remez, Drush, Soid all make up one Torah, one complete Torah. This is also emphasized in what the Zohar says in regards to Pnimiyus HaTorah and Nigla the Torah. That Pnimiyus HaTorah is like the Neshama, and Nigla the Torah is the body, is the guf. That means it's both the Neshama and the guf of one thing. Says the Rebbe, based on this, we need to understand in our parsha, in regards to the machloikas of Korach. In Pnimiyus HaTorah, it's explained at great length the tremendous high level of Korach. And the idea, in a positive way, the great quality of what his complaints were. In fact, there's even the explanation that his mistake was only because he was demanding this particular conduct, that Levim should be Koyanim, something that's only going to become true la'asid lavoi, whereas these days, in the world of Hayoim la'asoisam, in this world of action, this type of conduct cannot take place, as explained at length in Chassidus. But in Derech HaPshat, of course, in Pshutei Shel Mikra, we just learn about the tremendous descent, the tremendous fall of Korach, the very big punishment of Korach with his whole congregation, due to their machloikas, as explained at length in the simple meaning of the psukim, and even more so in the Mefarshei HaTorah. Says the Rebbe, this isn't really a very, very strong question, because even though it's true that Torah is a Torah achas, but every portion in Torah belongs to a different world, to a different level, just like every portion in Torah has its own special rules of how that particular part of Torah is learned. Nevertheless, we still need to have some sort of explanation. Because since, after all, the four parts of the Torah, Pshat, Remez, Drush, Soid, correspond to the four worlds, Atzilus, Bri, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, of course, is what the Rebbe is referring to, which in the worlds, each one is neshtalshel, one comes from the other. So therefore, what should follow is that the same is true with the four ways of learning Torah, that the Chelek HaPshat, within the Chelek HaPshat, needs to be expressed, at least to a certain extent, at least in a certain detail, the Maila of Korach and his complaints, just like it is explained at great length in Pnimiyus HaTorah. In order to understand this, the Rebbe says, we're first going to focus on a number of questions and diyukim in the simple meaning of the psukim. So number one, how does it make sense that the 250 people that joined Korach agreed to be makriv the Ktoros? As Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to challenge them and test them and said, this is going to be your test, we'll see who's the Kohen. How does it make sense that they agreed to this? They knew that through the Ktoros, Nadav and Avihu got burnt. They knew that a zar, that a foreigner that brings Ktoros is Mischayev benafshoy, Mischayev misa. Says the Rebbe, even the fact that the Medrash says, and that Rashi says, V'loi tipshim hayu, they weren't fools, because Moshe Rabbeinu warned them, and they accepted this upon themselves. They were ready to be makriv the Ktoros. But rather what happened was, in other words, as Medrash and Rashi says, Chatu al nafshoisem, they sinned against their souls. So we need to have explanation what exactly brought them to the sin, to be ready to give up their lives even though they were warned exactly what's going to happen. A second question that Rebbe asks is, in Medrash and in Rashi it brings in regards to what Moshe Rabbeinu said, Zoysasu k'chulachem achtois, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells them to prepare the Ktoros, Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, Anu ein lanu ela Hashem echad. We have one Eibishter. We have one Kohen Gadol. You are 250 people. You want Kohuna Gdoila? And then Moshe Rabbeinu finishes with the following puzzling words. Af ani roitze bekach. I too would like to have this. Says the Rebbe, it's very difficult to understand. Here we're speaking about 250 people that are standing with a machloikas against the Kohuna Gdoila of Aaron. They want to take it away from him. How does it make sense that Moshe Rabbeinu is kavayachol joining in with them by saying, even if it's just saying it, but how can he even say such words? I also want this. Furthermore, why is Moshe Rabbeinu even saying this? Is this supposed to have some sort of impact on them? What kind of impact would this have on the 250 people? A third question. In the general machloikas of Korach, we need to understand the Eibishter promises Moshe, V'gam b'cho ya'aminu la'olam, that the Yidden are going to believe in you forever. How does it then make sense that Korach could come and argue against Moshe? Him, with his whole group, with his whole congregation, shouldn't believe that what Moshe Rabbeinu is doing is because Hashem had sent him. Especially that we're speaking about 250 people that were heads of the Sanhedrin, the leaders of the Eidah. The Eibishter promised Moshe Rabbeinu that everyone will believe you. So what's going on here? Especially based on what the Rambam says and Mefarshei HaTorah say, that the idea of B'cho ya'aminu la'olam, the Yidden are going to believe in Moshe Rabbeinu, is a result of what we saw by ourselves, not a foreigner. We ourselves saw it. Our own ears heard it. Nobody else. We heard the fire, the sounds, the torches of fire. That we saw Moshe Rabbeinu approaching the cloud, the fog, and the voice speaking to him. We heard the Eibishter saying to him, Moshe, Moshe, go tell the Yidden so and so. So all of this we saw ourselves by Matan Torah. In fact, the Rambam tells us that if a Navi is going to come and try to do all sorts of wonders and miracles and try to contradict the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not going to listen to him. We're going to know clearly that what he's doing is just using witchcraft and other similar methods, because the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu is not based on signs and miracles and wonders that he performed, but rather what we ourselves saw with our eyes and heard with our ears, just like Moshe Rabbeinu did. Now this is true even in all future generations. How much more so when we're speaking about the original nation that saw this all, the original generation that saw this all. So the question then becomes, how does it then make sense? And after all of this, Korach comes, and Korach is not a Navi. Korach is not showing miracles or wonders. And yet, how does it make sense that he's pulling along with him, dragging along with him such a big group of Yidden to deny and to contest Moshe Rabbeinu as the Navi and the Shliach of Hashem? Says the Rebbe, the explanation goes as follows. As it's explicitly in the Pasuk, the kavanah of Machlokas Korach and his community was that there should be the idea of kahuna, but rather they all wanted to be koyanim, or even koyanim gedolim, as Moshe Rabbeinu says, uvikashtem gam kahuna, you also want kahuna. Says the Rebbe, based on this, Korach is not actually coming to deny that Moshe Rabbeinu is the Shliach of Hashem, and that the things that Moshe Rabbeinu had done, including even appointing the Koyanim, he's not denying that this is coming from Hashem. Rather, Korach was of the opinion that what Moshe Rabbeinu brought as a message from Hashem, this is still negotiable. Something could still be added to this or changed. How does this make sense? Well, just like we find that through tefillah and bakasha we could ask for things and accomplish things, that the Eibishter should change and take off a gzeira, a gzardin, etc. And we even saw this already, that Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah was able to accomplish after the Chet HaEgel and after the Chet HaMeraglim, that Moshe Rabbeinu was able to remove gzeiris and other similar stories. So Korach was of the opinion that we could be poiled, that the Eibishter should take away the Kohuna G'dola from Aaron and give it over to Korach. Especially that in fact, in regards to Kohuna itself, we find already that there was a change. First it belonged to the B'chayros, and then as a result of the Chet, it was taken away from them and given to Shevet Levi, it was given to Aaron and his children. Furthermore, over here, there's a special reason to take it away from Aaron. Aaron had somewhat of a connection to Chet HaEgel, which the Chet was, of course, the reason why the Kohuna was l'chatchila given to the Koyanim. Whereas the rest of Shevet Levi, and Korach included, had absolutely no connection to the Chet HaEgel. On the contrary, Kol B'nai Levi, all of the B'nai Levi, were told in Parshas Kisisa, fought against, had Mulchama against those people that Proi, Aaron, L'Shimtza, that Aaron had exposed them to disgrace them. So Aaron in some way had some sort of connection to bring them to the Chet HaEgel, Chas V'Sholem, but to a certain degree there was some connection, whereas the B'nai Levi had no connection at all. So this is what's happening with Korach. Not that he's denying that Moshe Rabbeinu got this nevuah, that Hashem sent him, but rather he's expressing his idea that this could be changed. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu say that Korach and his whole congregation are arguing with him? And they're saying that Loi Hashem Shlachani, this is the way Moshe Rabbeinu repeats and says what they're arguing. That means Moshe Rabbeinu could think that maybe they are concerned that Hashem didn't send him. Says the Rebbe, that's only coming because of Moshe's humility. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble man on earth. So Moshe Rabbeinu thought, and he held that the promise that Hashem gave him, perhaps wasn't fulfilled. Like Yaakov Avinu was afraid, maybe because of something I did wrong, Hashem's promise was taken away, even though there was already a promise and a guarantee. So Moshe Rabbeinu was thinking, as a result of his humility, maybe something got messed up, and now Hashem's promise is not being fulfilled. So yes, someone could contest his authority or the fact that Hashem had sent him. But again, going back to Korach, that's not what actually was in Korach's mind. Says the Rebbe, now we could start understanding also in regards to the 250 people, that they also were not meaning to argue against Moshe Rabbeinu. Rather, they also wanted to be Kohanim Gedolim. As Rashi emphasizes, and you 250 people, you also want Kohanim Gedolim. The Rebbe says in the brackets over here that via Shloimar, that Korach actually wanted to be a Kohen Gadol instead of Aaron. In other words, he wanted to replace Aaron, so there's one Kohen Gadol. In the case of the 250 people, they actually wanted to be Kohanim Gedolim in addition to Aaron Kohen Gadol. They just want more Kohanim Gedolim. So the Rebbe goes on and says, what is this tremendous desire, this yearning that they want Kohen Gedolim? The Medrashim and Rashi go ahead and explain that Moshe Rabbeinu actually says, Afani roitze bekach, I also want this. In other words, this desire to be a Kohen Gadol, Moshe Rabbeinu also has. This desire itself is a good thing. It's a great thing. The actual desire for Kohuna G'dayla is not because they want to take some sort of control over the Yidden. Rather, since a Kohen Gadol is on such a high level, removed from the rest of the Yidden, on the level of Kodesh Kadoshim, always standing in front of Hashem to serve Hashem, they also want to be on this level of Kodesh HaKadoshim, on this level of Kohen Gadol. And Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, and he explains to them, that the actual desire to be a Kohen Gadol, that's a great thing. I also want this. But practically, there could only be one Kohen Gadol. Nevertheless, these 250 people had such a strong desire that they agreed to be makriv diktoris, knowing exactly the warning of Moshe Rabbeinu that they are all going to get lost. They were ready to be makriv diktoris, even for a temporary benefit of being able to just for this one time be able to do this holy avodah, to stand in front of Hashem, to do this avodah, being close to Hashem. And yes, they recognize and they realize it's going to end up like Nadav and Avihu. The Rebbe says this is similar to the explanation that's given in regards to the Kohanim Gedolim in the time of Bayis Sheni, where we say that the Kohanim Gedolim didn't manage to serve more than one Yom Kippur and they would pass away within the year. Nevertheless, they tried very hard to become Kohanim Gedolim. They were even paying for it. And the question, of course, is, since they knew that the previous Kohen Gadol did not end up living through the year, and the next Kohen Gadol knowing his own level, that he's also not deserving of it, how does it make sense that they were pushing for this to become the Kohen Gadol? So again, the explanation is similar to what we said, that because of the tremendous yearning and desire to want to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur, where the Shechina is there in such an open and revealed way, everything is worth it to them, even if they're not going to end up living through the year. Says the Rebbe, now we could start understanding how in Pshutei Shel Mikra we also see the very great idea and quality of the Machloikas of Korach and his community, because I said before, the reason and the point of the Machloikas was actually because of their tremendous desire to be a Kohen Gadol, to be so holy to Hashem on the level of Kodesh HaKadoshim. Says the Rebbe, where is Korach and his congregation getting this rotz and this desire to be Kohanim Gedolim? The truth of the matter is, this is emphasized in his words itself. The pasuk says, "Ki kol eida kulam kedoshim." Korach is arguing, everyone is holy. Ubesoichem Hashem, and Hashem is in their midst. Umadu atisnasu. Why are you, Moshe and Aaron, lifting yourself up above everyone? Says the Rebbe, the Tanchuma, the Medrash Tanchuma, and Rashi both say that what does this mean? What does it mean that everyone's holy? We were all at Har Sinai. We all heard the words by Har Sinai from Hashem himself. So why are you lifting yourself up? You shouldn't have chosen for your brother the kahuna. You're not the only ones that heard at Har Sinai, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. All the Yidden heard this. What happened by Matan Torah? Hashem said to the Yidden before Matan Torah, Va'atam tiyuli mamleches koyanim v'goy kodesh. You're all a nation of kings, a kingdom of koyanim, and a holy nation. The Baal HaTurim writes about this, that by Har Sinai, during the time of Matan Torah, every single Yid was on the level of a Kohen Gadol. So since, in their very essence, every Yid is shaykh to the concept of Kahuna Gdoila, it's just a matter that as a result of the Chet HaEgel, it was taken away. In other words, they're not on this level. So this brings out in Korach and his community this desire for Kahuna Gdoila. Says the Rebbe, based on this will also be very geschmack, why the name of the Sedra, as it's called in Minig Yisrael, which Minig Yisrael, of course, is Torah, we call it Korach. We don't call it Vayikach. We don't even say Vayikach Korach. What's the idea of Vayikach Korach? Rashi, the Targum, translates on Vayikach Korach the Ispeleg Korach, which means he's separated. As Rashi says, he took himself to a side to be removed, separated from the rest of the congregation to fight against the kahuna. So if it would say Vayikach Korach at least, we would know that it's referring to the machloikas of Korach. But we just have the word Korach itself. When we just have the word Korach, it's not even hinted in any way what is Aveira is. In other words, the machloikas against Moshe to contest the kahuna and all of that. We're just saying a word Korach. It doesn't even seem like necessarily something so negative. Says the Rebbe, because the Hayrah that we are supposed to be taking from Korach, from Parshas Korach, is not only the negative, not to be like Korach and his people, but there's also something positive over here. This desire that Korach has, and that the 250 people have, and that Moshe Rabbeinu had, as we said, every Yid needs to have this. And on the contrary, the Rebbe says, this is actually a proof that we heard these words at Har Sinai from Hashem, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, that Havaya became Elokecha, meaning your personal Eibishter, your Koyach, became your energy, your Chayas. You took it very, very personally. So that's really the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to become part of us, this tremendous desire. What's supposed to not be practically is the Vayikach Korach. That is, as we said, Vayikach Korach is the separation of Korach that is leading a machloikis, which will go against the kahuna, against the Kohen Gadol that the Eibishter had appointed through Moshe Rabbeinu. And to want to practically be the Kohen Gadol, that's a problem. Because B'poyel Mamish, practically, there's only one Kohen Gadol, the one that the Eibishter chooses. But the desire, this is something that we all need to have all of the time. Says the Rebbe in Seif Ches, seemingly we could still ask a question. In regards to Shevet Levi, which, as we know, they were separated to serve the Eibishter and to teach Hashem's ways and His just ways to all the Yidden, and that's why they were separated from the ways of the world. They are the army of Hashem. Regarding Shevet Levi, the Rambam says that V'loi Shevet Levi Bulvad, that all of the above mentioned is not only regarding Shevet Levi, but every single Yid that's motivated and he wants to separate himself and stand in front of Hashem to serve Him, to know Hashem, and removes from himself all of the many, many different calculations of the world that many other people are involved in. And he just wants to dedicate himself to Hashem. Every single Yid, says the Rambam, Harezen, Niskadesh, Kodesh, Kadoshim, he becomes absolutely in the holiest level. What we see over here is something very interesting. In Avodah Ruchnis, in the spiritual Avodah, every single Yid is shaykh to the Avodah of Shevet Levi, to stand in front of Hashem, to serve Hashem, and he's on the level of Kodesh Kadoshim. If that's the case, seemingly, there should be the same idea regarding the Kohen Gadol, that the spiritual Avodah of Kohen Gadol is shaykh to every single Yid. So why is it that we say that you should only remain at the Roitze B'kach, only at the desire, but practically it seems like that even Beruchnius, there's only one Kohen Gadol. So why in regards to Shevet Levi do we say this Beruchnius is shaykh to everyone, and not in regards to the Kohen Gadol? Says the Rebbe, in order to understand this, we're first going to look at something that seems actually exactly the opposite in regards to Shevet Levi and the Kohen Gadol. And that is, in regards to Shevet Levi, as we just said, Kol ish v'ish, every single person, asher nodva rucha oisei, that his heart is generous, etc., and he's motivated to do this, he becomes on the level of Shevet Levi. But at the same time, even though the Rambam says that every Yid is shaykh to this, it does not say anything like the expression that we find by the Kohen Gadol that a Yid needs to, and he needs to try to be on the level of Shevet Levi. Yes, every Yid could do it, but we don't find this expression, every Yid needs to be like Shevet Levi. In regards to the Kohen Gadol, we said, based on what we explained, really that should be the desire of every Yid. So we find over here something that seems to be a little bit opposites. On the one hand, again, every Yid is shaykh to be Shevet Levi, but we're not telling every Yid to try to be Shevet Levi. In regards to the Kohen Gadol, we're saying every Yid should want to be a Kohen Gadol, but no, not every Yid can be like a Kohen Gadol. So what's going on? Says the Rebbe, the explanation is as follows. In Avodas Hashem, there's generally three ideas. Three general things. We have mitzvahs, we have Torah, and we have Mesiras Nefesh. Mitzvahs, as we know, are clothed in physical things. Tzitzis in physical, we need to use physical fur, physical wool, We need to have tefillin from physical parchment. And so too, when the avodah generally involving all the matters of the world, we need to refine, we need to elevate the gashmias, making from it a keli for Hashem. Number two, we have Torah. Torah is higher than clothing itself in the world. And even after it comes down to many, many different levels, through ishtalshalus, and comes down into speech, and into thought, and into action, and so on, nevertheless, as Torah comes into the world, the darkness of the world is never concealing on the Torah. As the famous halacha, that the words of Torah can never become tamei. In Avodas Hashem, what does this bring out by a person? The concept of being removed from the world. Then we have step number three, Mesiras Nefesh, which is completely higher. Api Torah, it's higher than all of the limitations of Torah and mitzvahs. What is Mesiras Nefesh? Its inyan is becoming completely one, united with Elikus in a way beyond all limitations. Says the Rebbe, these three avodas generally are three general avodas that we have amongst Klal Yisrael. We have most of the Yidden who their avodah is in a way of Hanigba and Minig Derech Eretz. They're involved with the worldly things, business, work, etc. A person plowing, a person sowing. And of course, even in those situations, to be Makayim mitzvahs. In fact, we have the avodah that every Yid needs to be involved in, which is called Kol Ma'aseh Chiyul L'Shem Shamayim. Whatever we do, even in our mundane things, should be for the sake of Hashem. Chol Drachecha Da'eyu, in all of our ways, we should know Hashem. This is the general idea of those Yidden that are called Mori Uvn Tovin, the masters of good deeds. Then we have step number two, which we spoke about before, the avodah of Shevet Levi, those that were separated to serve Hashem, to teach Hashem's just ways to the public. As the pasuk says, Yoyru Mishpatecha LeYaakov V'Saroscha LeYisrael, they were separated from the ways of the world, which generally this is the madrega that we call Morei Torah, the masters of Torah. Finally, we have the avodah of a kohen, and specifically a kohen gadol that's not even allowed to go out of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, as we know, is made up of two words, Yira Shalim, complete fear, complete awe of Hashem, which the shleimus of Yira is the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh, that absolute bittul. Furthermore, we say, Min HaMikdash Lo Yetze, he doesn't even go out of the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, his idea is to stand in a constant unity and connection with Hashem. And of course, there's that unique and special avodah that the Kohen Gadol has, going into the Kodesh HaKadoshim once a year on Yom Kippur, and to do his avodah, which this is clearly this idea of Mesiras Nefesh, this motion, this mode of Mesiras Nefesh, to be Yechidah L'Yachdach, one with Hashem. Says the Rebbe, now let's have a look again at these two extremes that we said before regarding Shevet Levi and the Kohen Gadol. That again, on the one hand, we said that the avodah of Shevet Levi practically is shaykh to every single person. On a regular basis, a person can be like Shevet Levi. Whereas the avodah of Kohen Gadol, we said, you could only have that desire, but you can't actually get to that level. On the other hand, we said, regarding Shevet Levi, we never said every Yid needs to try to be like Shevet Levi, unless he has this generous spirit. Whereas the avodah of Kohen Gadol, we said every Yid should have this desire right tzemekach. So the Rebbe explains like this. In the avodah of a Yid, being in this world, there are these two general ideas. We have the avodah of the person working with himself, We have the avoid of the person working with the world. Generally, this is the chiluk of Morei Torah and Morei Uvdin Tovin, the masters of Torah, the masters of good deeds. Which the main avoid and hayra for every single yid. Generally, the main thing that a yidden are involved in is the involvement in doing mitzvahs, Morei Uvdin Tovin, because through this we accomplish the idea of dira b'tachtonim. So that's the regular mode that most yidden are involved in. A person that's not varuchai, a person that has a special generous spirit, he could have, that by him should become his main avodah in the avodah of Torah, Morei Torah. In other words, to separate himself from the world. This is an avodah that shayach, every yid could be there if he wants to be there. We then have the avodah of the Kohen Gadol, which is the absolute dveikus and connection to Hashem in a way of mesiras nefesh. Now, this is not a regular seder for every single person every single day in his avodas Hashem, but what there does need to be is the concept of roitze bekach. The person has to have that mindset that this is the focus, this is where I want to be, this is what I'm trying to get to. So the Rebbe explains, by both of the avodos, in other words, whether the avodah of Torah or mitzvahs, whether the avodah of Morei Torah and Uvdin Tovin, which are again either the avodah of every yid on a regular basis or the yidden that specially want to be involved in Torah, but by both of them, every yid needs to have the rotzoin, that desire to be connected to the Eibishter to the extent of mesiras nefesh. But since, of course, the kavanah and rotzoin of the essence of Hashem is that there should be a neshama beguf ba'olam hazeh, fulfilling the rotzoin of Hashem, so he's doing his avodah down here in one of the two ways, which is again Torah or mitzvahs. Either in the main avodah in Yadam Gashmim through fulfilling mitzvahs, making the world a dira lo yizbarech, or the avodah of some of the people that are masters of Torah separated from the world. But at the same time, the roitze bekach has to be. He has to have that desire to be completely united to the extent of mesiras nefesh. And davka, when you have the roitze bekach, that you're rotzing your desire to Hashem to be completely davuk lelikus, to be completely connected to Hashem, this is the way you're going to be able to do b'shleimus also the other two avodos of Torah and mitzvahs, because then the world on its own is not a goal and a purpose for itself. Separating from the world is also not a goal and purpose for itself. Rather, again, the one focus is just being one with Hashem. And b'makim sheritzoyne shel adam shamu nimtzu, where a person's desire is, that's where he is. And therefore, in every single avodah, what's his rotzin, what's his thought? Dveikus to Hashem. And then we are also zoiche that we have bepoil the gili of la'asid, when it will be fulfilled that Leviim will be koyanim. And furthermore, every single yid is going to be on the level of a koyan gadol. As it says in the Balaturim that la'asid lavoy, it will come back to the yid in the idea of kahuna gdoila, as the pasuk says, va'atem koyanei Hashem tikareu, you will all be called the koyanim of Hashem. By the geula amitis v'ashleimus through Mashiach Tzidkeinu, when we will have Moshe va'Aaron imohem.